George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Virginia, in what was then British America. He was not born into royal power or into a president's palace, because no such thing even existed yet. America was still a group of colonies controlled by the British king. Washington's family owned land and worked as planters, so they were not poor. They were not part of the old European nobility either. They lived a rural life, close to the land, with fields, rivers, and forests all around them. From an early age, George was shaped more by farms, tools, and nature than by polished city life. As a boy, Washington did not have a long or fancy formal education. He never went to university, and he left school in his early teens. Instead of advanced books, his teachers were experience, hard work, and observation. He learned practical subjects like surveying, mathematics, and how to read and write clearly. There is a famous, probably exaggerated legend that he once admitted to cutting down a cherry tree and said, "I cannot tell a lie." Whether or not that story is literally true, it reflects the quality people most admired in him: honesty. Even as a young man, he built a reputation for being straightforward, dependable, and serious. As a teenager, Washington became a land surveyor. This job took him into the wilderness, far from comfortable homes and town streets. He measured land, marked boundaries, and wrote reports under harsh conditions: mud, rain, wild animals, and cold nights. The work was physically demanding and sometimes dangerous, but it taught him crucial skills. He learned to read maps and terrain, to deal with different kinds of people, and to stay calm under pressure. These skills would later help him not just on paper, but on battlefields and in politics. Where the landscape was human and emotional instead of physical, Washington also learned the responsibilities of managing a farm and estate. After his older brother Lawrence died, he eventually took over the family property at Mount Vernon. There he became a planter, managing crops, workers, finances, and trade. This experience gave him a close view of both the opportunities and the moral problems of his time. Like many landowners in the colonies, he owned enslaved people who worked his fields. That reality is a painful part of his story and the story of early America. Over his lifetime, his thinking about slavery changed, and toward the end of his life he made the rare decision, for a man of his position, to free the enslaved people he owned in his will. His journey on this issue shows how even great leaders are shaped by, and must struggle with, the limits of their time. In his 20s, Washington's life moved from quiet fields to military duties. The British and French empires were fighting for control of North America. Their conflict dragged in Native American nations and colonial militias. Washington was given a role in the Virginia militia and soon found himself involved in the French and Indian War. He faced early defeats and made mistakes. But he also showed courage and resilience under fire. He rode through bullets and chaos to carry messages, rallied men who were frightened, and learned how war truly feels muddy, confusing, and cruel, not glorious like in stories. These early military experiences gave him training that would prove vital later, after the war. Washington returned to Mount Vernon and tried to live the life of a gentleman farmer. He married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with children, and together they formed a respected and comfortable household. Washington managed his estate, experimented with new farming methods, and served in the local colonial assembly. On the surface, it might have seemed like he was settling into a quiet life, but big changes were coming. Across the Atlantic, the British government was introducing new taxes and laws for the American colonies, and many colonists felt these rules were unfair because they had no representation in the British Parliament. Tension was rising slowly, like pressure inside a sealed pot. Washington was not a loud or radical speaker, but he believed in fairness and self-government. He joined other colonial leaders in protesting against British policies. When clashes finally turned into open conflict in 1775 at places like Lexington and Concord, the colonies needed a military commander to lead their forces. Because of his previous experience, his calm personality, and his reputation for integrity, George Washington was chosen as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. This was not a comfortable promotion. It was a heavy burden. He now had to lead poorly trained and poorly supplied troops against the most powerful army in the world. The war for independence was long, difficult, and full of setbacks. Washington's army lacked proper clothing, food, and equipment. Soldiers sometimes walked barefoot in the snow, leaving bloody footprints. Many wanted to go home. There were defeats on the battlefield, internal quarrels, and times when hope seemed to disappear. One of the darkest moments was the winter at Valley Forge, where Washington's troops suffered from hunger, cold, and disease. Yet Washington stayed with his men. He rode among the tents, spoke with them, and shared their hardships. His presence reminded them that their struggle had a purpose beyond the pain, the chance to live in a free country. Washington was not the most brilliant tactical genius of all time, but he had two great strengths: patience and persistence. He understood that he did not have to win every battle. He only had to keep the army alive and fighting until the British grew tired and political conditions changed. He chose his battles carefully, retreated when necessary, and struck when the time was right. With the help of allies like France, the war slowly turned in the Americans' favor. In 1781, at Yorktown, British forces surrendered in a decisive moment, and the path to independence opened. The colonies had won their freedom. Washington's leadership was a major reason why. After the war ended, Washington did something truly remarkable. Instead of holding on to power, he resigned his military command and went back to his farm at Mount Vernon. In a world where many victorious generals became dictators, this act surprised people around the world. By willingly giving up power, he sent a message. The army served the people, not the other way around. He wanted to be a citizen again, not a king. This humility increased the respect people had for him and made him even more trusted when the young nation needed guidance in the future. But the new United States soon faced serious problems. The first system of government, created under the Articles of Confederation, was too weak. The states argued money was unstable, and there was no strong central authority to solve national issues. Many leaders believed a new constitution was needed. Washington, though tired and longing for privacy, agreed to preside over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. He did not speak often in debates, but his presence alone helped keep the atmosphere serious and focused. The result of that convention was the United States Constitution, a new framework of government with separate branches and checks and balances. When it came time to choose the country's first president under the new Constitution, there was almost no debate about who it should be. George Washington was elected unanimously. He did not campaign or ask for the office. In fact, he accepted it with a sense of duty more than excitement. He knew that whatever he did as the first president would set examples for all future presidents. There were no rules yet for how a president should behave, what traditions to follow, or how power should be passed on. Washington had to invent the role as he went along. As president, Washington tried to act as a unifying figure. He chose advisors with different opinions, listened to them, and made decisions that he believed would strengthen the young nation. The new government faced many challenges: war debts, conflicts with Native Americans on the frontier, tensions with Britain and France, and internal disagreements about how much power the federal government should have. Political parties began to form, and arguments grew heated. Washington sometimes felt caught in the middle, but he kept his focus on the bigger goal, proving that a free republic could survive in a world of kings and empires. One of his most important decisions was actually about leaving power. After serving to 4-year terms as president, Washington stepped down and refused to run for a third. He could probably have remained president for life if he had wanted to. But he believed that no one person should hold the office forever. By quietly returning to his farm, he set a tradition of peaceful transfer of power. Later American presidents followed this example, and it became a core part of the country's political culture. Once again, Washington showed that true greatness is not just in taking power, but in letting it go in his farewell address. Washington warned the young nation about dangers he saw ahead. He cautioned against extreme divisions between political parties, against permanent hatreds or attachments to foreign nations, and against abandoning moral values in public life. His words still echo in debates centuries later. After leaving the presidency, he returned to Mount Vernon, hoping to live his final years in relative quiet, managing his estate and spending time with his family. However, even in retirement, he was occasionally called upon for advice and service until his death in 1799. Today, George Washington is remembered as the father of his country in the United States. Monuments, currency, and countless books carry his name and face. But behind the statues and symbols is a human story, a boy with limited schooling, a land surveyor walking through forests, a farmer managing an estate, a soldier suffering through winter with his men, and a reluctant president who tried to do what was right rather than what was easy. He made mistakes, had limitations, and was a man of his century, not a perfect hero carved from stone. Yet, his choices in the hardest moments helped create and stabilize a new nation. For your viewers, the story of riches in George Washington's life is not about money, land, or power. It is about character, honesty, self-control, persistence, and humility. He began as a provincial young man without elite European education, and through effort and responsibility, he became the first president of a new kind of country. He shows that leadership is not only about winning battles, but about serving others, giving up power when the time is right, thinking about the long-term future instead of personal glory. His life proves that real richness is found in the trust of the people you lead and in the legacy you leave behind.